Anytime we want, right?
And then you'll just instruct me to do the roll call. We'll just do it like we normally do.
Okay, well, I think we're all here. So I'm gaveling the meeting of the Campbell Planning Commission, calling it to order for June 9th, 2020. And legally, I should say this, that this planning commission meeting will be conducted via telecommunication and is compliant with provisions of the Brown Act and Executive Order N-29-20 issued by the governor. And with that, Corinne, can we have a roll call, please?
Certainly, I'll do it in alphabetical order. Commissioners Bookbinder.
Present.
King.
Here.
Colville.
Present.
Hines.
Here.
Rivlin.
Here.
And Chair Cray.
Here. And for the record, Commissioner Ostrowski is absent, as we've said. And our first order of business, we're very thankful that Corinne takes great minutes, because these are the minutes of our February 11th meeting, which I'm sure is at the tip of everybody's mind. So hopefully everybody did have a chance to review the minutes, and then we had quite a discussion on one item there at least. So are there any corrections or a motion for approval?
I'd like to move to approve the minutes as they exist in the packet.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Corinne, can we have a voice vote?
That was Commissioner Hines who seconded.
Yes.
Sure. This would be an all in favor.
Aye.
Aye.
And I abstain. I wasn't there.
Okay. Thank you.
Then I don't know what we do with communications exactly at this point.
There were a couple of emails that were forwarded to you by Daniel. There's nothing new other than those two.
Okay. And are there any agenda modifications or postponements?
There are none, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And I guess at this point, I know that there's at least one person on the meeting. So this is the point of the meeting where any member of the public can address any item that's not on the agenda. And I don't know if we have anybody who wants to do that, but this would be the time to do that. And I don't think there is anybody. Hearing or seeing nobody, I think we'll move on with our agenda. So here we go. Item number 1 is a public hearing to consider the City of Campbell 2021-2025 Capital Improvement Plan for citywide projects for consistency with the Campbell General Plan. Staff is recommending that the project be deemed exempt under CEQA, and it's tentatively planned for the City Council meeting of June 25th. Oops, it says 2019, but I assume is it June 25th?
Yes.
Yeah, I guess that would be 2020, not 2019. And the project planner is Daniel Fama. Daniel?
Thank you. So this is the annual finding for the Plan Commission to determine that the city's capital improvement plan is consistent with the city's general plan as required by the California Government Code. The purpose of this is really to focus on consistency with applicable general plan policies, strategies, and goals as outlined in the staff report. We took an effort this time to actually go item by item of new capital improvement projects and additional expenditures and identify the applicable policies and goals that staff believes they are consistent with. Just in terms of your purview, we really try to avoid getting into particular projects unless those projects the commission believes may not be consistent with the general plan. And at that point, we should focus the discussion on that. We do have Margarita Mendoza here, our administrative analyst, who did a lot of the work on the capital improvement plan, should you have any questions on particular projects. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel. Any commissioners have any questions for Daniel?
I have 2 questions about a particular project, if there's nothing else before we get into that.
I have one general question, Commissioner Bookbinder, not on a specific project. And I just thought of this, Daniel, when I was going through the report. And I noticed that it said there were 13 new projects and 13 that already had funding and carryovers. And when you I guess I'm wondering if it would help in the future, or if it's pertinent to what we're doing, if the new projects can be kind of highlighted or pointed out. I actually couldn't find 13 when I went down to our tables when it said the year of funding. I counted like 7 or 8 or 9 projects, but I actually couldn't come up with 13 that I thought were the new projects, and I just didn't know how to find them, and I didn't know how pertinent that is to our discussion. I thought it might be to some extent.
It's in
Okay,
the desk item that Daniel sent out. Just I think, I don't know if it was last night or this morning, but he shows
The
it
13.
shows the 13.
Yeah, that's the updated CIP list. The staff report also did excerpt those tables. You do have a table that identifies new capital projects, and then the 2 items that require additional appropriations, and then the last table are existing capital projects that have been previously approved in previous CIPs.
Okay, but I like what so the 13 new okay. Oh, I
It's
got
like, for
you.
instance,
Yeah, they're
Measure
right there.
O, the
Got
civic
it,
center
got it.
improvements. Yeah.
I got it. Never mind. Okay, good. Commissioner Bookbinder, please go ahead.
So I had a question about the purchase of I have this written down, a Lenco Bearcat. As I understand it, it is intended to replace a V-150 armored rescue vehicle that the city has had since 1998. I guess it is justified under public safety. Just out of curiosity, how often has the existing V-150 unit been used?
So I'll start off by trying to answer that. So I don't have statistics in terms of how often it's been used, but I can give you a recent example. I don't know if last year you recall at Denny's, there was an incident with a hostage situation and at the Denny's on Bascom Avenue. I don't know if many of you recall that.
Yep.
Yeah, so in that case, we needed to borrow equipment to assist the police officers respond to that situation. So it's in this case, my understanding is not so much of a it's a need, because when we have a need for that kind of vehicle, it's a really critical public safety need. So it's something that the police department would like to have in terms of their equipment available to them to assist during these like critical public safety situations. And in this particular equipment purchase, you'll see that we have the cost is spread out over a couple of 4 years, and that's through a lease purchase that's how we plan to acquire the capital asset, through a lease, which helps spread out the cost versus a one-time higher expense.
Okay, the reason I ask is that as I understand it, it was originally acquired, or the current one was originally acquired through the 1033 program, which is, as I understand it, getting free military equipment.
Yes.
And this is no longer free. Right. My broader concern is that this is, it is essentially military equipment, and we're seeing a lot of that being used for crowd control purposes these last couple of weeks, and I'm leery of the claim that that's useful for public safety, as it seems to be being used for quite the opposite in a lot of places.
Yes, that's definitely an legitimate or individual concern that could be shared with the city council. As Daniel discussed earlier, what we want to get your feedback on is how the projects conform to the general plan. However, your concern is more of a policy related issue. And
my question is how it does this enhance public safety, which is how this is being justified under the general plan, as I understand it.
If I can jump in there. So as part of the staff report, we did identify those policies that are applicable. So with that particular line item, we identified strategy 8S-1.1A, titled Emergency Planning Funding. Provide funding for fire and police services to ensure preparedness of response teams and implementation of emergency response plans. So based off the professional judgment of the police chief, he does believe that this piece of equipment does serve that need and would effectively function to help the city respond to emergency situations.
And that's what I wanted to bring up. The other thing I wanted to mention was the Harriet Avenue sidewalks that are there. As I understand it, we're planning on installing sharrows there. The strategic objective 3.3 that this is intended to enhance streets that safely and comfortably accommodate pedestrians and bicycles. As I understand it, sharrows or shared lane markings do not actually enhance safety for bicycles. Adding sidewalks obviously makes things better for pedestrians, but I don't see how this improves the situation for cyclists unless they ride on the sidewalk, which I think we prohibit.
I would add that, I mean, typically a lot of projects that include pedestrian or bicycle mobility are run past the city's BPAP, the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee. Not entirely sure that was the case with this, that has been done yet, but typically before being brought to the city council, that is done. And they do provide that type of community and professional feedback from a cyclist perspective. But unfortunately, we do not have our traffic engineer who otherwise could provide a more detailed response to that question.
I agree
Daniel,
with you, Commissioner Bookbinder.
if I could respond, Daniel, Margarita, this is an existing capital project that's transitioning out to year 2 and 3. Is that correct?
I think I may have read it wrong if that's the case.
Yeah, yes, you're right. You're right.
So it's already determined to be consistent with the general plan. I
Oh,
think
never mind me then.
today is the new. You know, this is a 5-year plan, so we identify what we can conceivably accomplish, you know, within first year, second year, third year, fourth year, you know, fifth year, et cetera. And sometimes those move depending on the cash flow. So it was already determined to be consistent. But Commissioner Bookbinder, if you have concerns about mobility and sharrows, please, you know, contact the Public Works Director and express your concerns. I think they're valid. And
Okay. Well, I suppose this, like the city's policy on this is pretty much in the general plan, and we're hopefully going to be redoing the general plan at some point, and that'll come before us then.
Yeah, in fact, the draft general plan is already been prepared and it's been circulated to the GPAC, and that should be coming your way here this calendar year. So yes, you'll be seeing the general plan.
Excellent.
This is Commissioner. Were you finished, Commissioner Bookbinder?
Yes, so those are the two things I wanted to bring up.
Thank you.
Okay, may I speak for a moment?
Sure.
And, on the Measure O, I think everything's fine. There's just a minor typo under alternatives. And when I read it, it made me ask a question to myself. So obviously it's in compliance with the general plan. It was voted on by voters of the city. Alternatives do not move forward. There's just a missing word at the end, no problem. Just type it up when it goes to city council. But I was curious when reading the alternatives, what happens with the funding if the alternative is to not move forward with the improvements? What happens to those funds? Should that be identified within that alternative? It says continue to repair elements, but $50 million for repair of elements is quite a war chest.
So we have our finance director, because this is a voter approved bond, I think we have an obligation, correct, to spend the money the way the voters approved it via the ballot measure. So to your point, you're right. That may not be an accurate alternative for this project. Will, is there an alternative to not spend the money?
a vote, it needs to be spent upon a specific purposes. And they are how defined as well. As and there wouldn't be any alternative there wouldn't be any alternative options and stuff there.
So we can do that. We can, moving forward for the proposed, the adopted budget, we can delete the alternative and clearly delineate that there is no alternative since this is a voter approved bond measure.
Yeah, I would support that. I mean, the item already has been approved. It just, the alternatives confuse me. So that or make it clear there are no alternatives other than to proceed or whatever
Okay.
the legal language said in the vote. I don't
Okay.
recall, to be honest.
Well, we can do
Commissioner
that.
Hines,
Thank
you
you.
have some questions?
Yeah, I didn't see any way to raise my hand in
Yeah,
Zoom other than
I
raise
saw the
my hand
hand.
physically. Yeah, all right. Thank you. I have 4 comments that I just want to make on this. That there's I want to emphasize a absolute abiding commitment along with the Campbell Chamber of Commerce, which I'm a member of as well, that Black Lives Matter. And that is a vital importance to our lives and to our fellow Campbell people. So I want to emphasize Black Lives Matter in that. In the budget, I see a substantial amount of variety of line items for the police department. And I want to emphasize total support for those, that it's vitally important for our police department to be able to have the capital budget, and that's going to be for the safety of themselves and the safety of the community. So that's the first 2 points. Third point is that I see in the budget that there's a number of steps that are being done for the community, for the city hall. They're small and minor. I just want to make sure with a larger measure O coming out, and this city hall, whatever measure O is going to, this is civic center improvements. It's going to affect a number of those. I just want to make sure that those capital budgets are actually not going to just be thrown out with the measure O, but can actually support the measure O going forward. So I know that you've done an extensive amount of work on the capital budget, and I just want to make sure that we're looking at those points and making sure that we're not going to throw them out when we do the measure O improvements that are in there. And then the last point, and this is what we're living in right now. It's a glaring gap, and not surprising that it would be because it's so new. But how do we address the COVID-19? That ain't going away. And how we address it, there'll be a vaccine within a year, but there's going to be another issue coming, another virus type thing come along. We have to have a clear understanding as to how we're going to address that in our schools, in our community, in our restaurants, in the watering holes we like. That's an important part for us to be able to figure out. These are comments that I'm making. I hope they're articulated to the city council. But I think the COVID-19 response is a glaring gap in the capital budget. I don't know what it is we need to do. It's got to be a general review of that.
So, for example, widen our sidewalks. That's a capital expense that would make it a lot easier for people to socially distance. I find myself walking in the road every so often, as an example.
So just a point of order, are we in the question section to staff, or are we in the general discussion, and are we asking for public comment on this section?
Well, we're talking, asking questions of staff, but we can quickly move into the general discussion.
Right, okay.
Commissioner Colville?
Mr. Chair, if
Yeah.
point of Point of order. So you'll need to open this up for the public. to
For the
speak.
public.
So if we can
Okay.
stick with the Q&A, and then once you're exhausted with all your questions, we'll open up
Sure.
for public comment, close the public comment period, and then begin to offer your opinion.
Will do. So we're at the questions for staff, folks. Anybody?
Yes, I've got a couple.
Okay, Commissioner
please.
Ching.
Okay, so is regarding the Lenco Bearcat armored rescue vehicle. And there's a policy HS 2.1, strategy HS 1.1, and actually on the description of the vehicle and rationale for its purchase, there's also a strategic objective 4.1. So I'm thinking about 2.1 in relation to consistency with the general plan. I'm looking at the wording here that says that meet citizens' needs. How do we know what the citizens' needs are? And especially in the current situation. Okay, so that's a question. How do we know what are the citizens' needs? Because that's 2.1. And then 4.1, improved feeling of safety within the community. Personally speaking, I'm not sure this makes me feel safer. I'm sure there's members of the community which will feel very unsafe with one of these vehicles, as we've seen in the news in other parts of the US. I would like to comment, I'm not inferring, or this is no reflection on Campbell Police Department, which I think is a great police department, but I have questions here. How do we know what the needs of the community are? 2.1, and improved feeling of safety. That is a subjective view, and I think it is very relevant. So it's a question we can talk about this in the after the public session. But those are my questions. Does the staff have a comment on that, on those particular questions?
I'd be happy to answer them. I apologize for not having the material in front of me. I wasn't expecting to join you this evening. But in answer to your first question about its use, I guess I'm disappointed to hear that that there's a belief that by having this vehicle, it would somehow make our community less safe, because it's the opposite that's the truth, which is why we put in for this vehicle. For a number of years, we had an armored personnel carrier that was obtained in the 90s from the Department of Justice. And that was through their 1033 program, a surplus armored vehicle. And for a number of years, our SWAT team trained and utilized that, because when we're faced with critical incidents that pose dangers to our community, there is a need for officers to have a way to safely resolve situations. And one of the examples that I can give you is the Denny's incident. I don't know if you're familiar with that, from February of 2019, where there was an armed individual who was barricaded inside of the Denny's on Bascom Avenue for over 11 hours. He was armed with a weapon. We did not have an armored personnel carrier. So the choices were that we needed to either ask for assistance from allied agencies, or the alternative would be to park our normal patrol cars in the middle of Bascom Avenue, placing our officers at risk when they're trying to safely de-escalate a situation with an individual with a gun. So fortunately, we had neighboring agencies who brought over their Lenco Bearcats, which is a commonly used armored vehicle for law enforcement throughout the United States. That's the go-to armored personnel carrier. And we were able to safely resolve that situation. And it was through the use of those vehicles that we were able to accomplish that. Now, the question may be, okay, so if you have these assets available through neighboring jurisdictions, why not just rely on them? And there's there's a lot of training that goes into tactical operations, using the Denny's as an example. And we want to provide our officers, our SWAT operators, with the appropriate tools and equipment and training that they need to safely perform whatever operation is needed. And by relying on another agency, there's no assurance that they're going to be available or that they will respond. And second to that is, with the training component, we don't have the ability. Our SWAT team trains on a monthly basis, and we don't have the ability to train with these other agencies with their vehicles on a monthly basis. So that creates potential communication issues, misunderstandings between agencies and what our standard operating procedures are. So while I understand the bigger dialogue about the militarization of law enforcement, my focus is on the safety of the Campbell community. And in order to be able to respond to situations like Denny's or an active shooter or a multitude of other examples that I can give you, we need tools that give us the capability of going into a dangerous situation where somebody could potentially be shooting at us to rescue citizens, rescue officers, perform these type of operations to keep our Campbell community safe. So when the question is it a need of the Campbell community? I think from my discussions with council and the community, and I don't know if any of you participated in or sat along for the budget discussion today, but I think everybody's priority is public safety, especially now. And by limiting our ability to keep our community safe, I think that has a direct impact on the Campbell community.
So I'm not sure if that actually answers the questions I asked. I think you started towards the end, but my first question was regarding meet the citizens' needs, and also the paragraph beforehand in the general plan talks about the community needs. So I guess my question in that respect is, what evidence do we have that supports the community and the citizens of Campbell, in this case, believe that this vehicle is actually required? My issue isn't the justification of it, saying we should have it or we shouldn't have it. And this is an especially sensitive subject at the present time, right? So maybe this wouldn't get the inspection that it would normally get, but I think it's justified, right? So I still don't understand the community needs. How do we know the community needs that, right? And the discussions you had with the community, I assume, were, probably more than a couple of months ago. And has the community changed its view? It may think it needs it even more. It may have gone the other way. And then the 4.1, improved feeling of safety. Again, it's subjective, right? But one person feeling good about it could equally mean another person feeling very unsafe about it. And I think just from the Campbell Police point of view, you'd want the community support on a $250,000 purchase of this vehicle, right? And that's why I'm digging into these questions, because the purview of this commission is just the consistency with the general plan, not the other things that I think you touched upon here, although relevant, right? I think that's for the city meeting in 25th of June. But those are the things I'm not convinced on in relation to consistency with the general plan.
I understand. And I think in answer to your first point, the first question is the community needs. Does this meet the community needs? And I guess that goes back to my previous statement that my belief is that the number one community need is to be safe. Public safety is a priority for the city, for our community. And in order for our community to be safe, there's a number of different factors that go into that. Obviously, the officers that we hire, the training that we provide, the equipment that is given to them. So from a community need perspective, we can turn on the TV any day, even before the last 2 weeks, and see situations that are deadly, potentially deadly. Over the weekend, there was a Santa Cruz sheriff's deputy who was shot and killed by an armed individual who had improvised explosive devices. So when you're talking about responding to calls like that, and while Campbell's an extremely safe community, those possibilities are there, and we need to prepare ourselves to keep the community safe. And this piece of equipment will do just that. I want to be a part of the dialogue with the community. I want to understand perspectives. At the end of the day, I look at my role as making sure that we have the equipment necessary and the tools and the staff trained appropriately so that we can handle any situation like this. And hopefully we never have to. But when you're talking about equipment for a public safety agent, for a police department, there are plenty of things that we have that I hope that we never have to use. But should the event come where we have to use it, where there is a mass casualty event, and we are in a position that we're not able to meet the community need of being safe and secure, whether it's in their home or downtown or wherever it may be, I think that puts us in a very difficult situation in order to do the job that I think our community expects of us. Now, to the second point about how people feel about it, I agree with you. That's a very subjective question. I think in the decision making to put this on CIP, I'm going on the assumption that people want to feel safe, and I don't look at it necessarily as the visual of this armored vehicle, because I understand that the visual of it is scary because it connects to other deadly situations throughout the country. But at the end of the day, it's a piece of equipment that is used to keep people safe.
Commissioner Ching, is that?
Can Commissioner Colville ask a question now, Commissioner Ching?
Yes, please.
We'll hang on to that for our discussion. And Commissioner Colville, go ahead, please.
I think we're having a great discussion here. I think we may be getting a bit opinionated, but Commissioner Ching has done a great job of saying that the scope of what we're looking at is just how it fits in the general plan. And he's done a great job of addressing the concerns about how he feels about it fitting into the general plan. I'd like to mention one slight fact that I do believe the police officers here are also members of our community. And so their safety and feeling of safety and the security is also of the utmost importance. And when he brings up the Denny's as a great situation where these members of our community, the police officers who are fighting for us to get everybody out of there safe and handle the situation, their safety and their feeling of security is also equally important. So I commend them for handling that the way they did back then. But getting onto the finances, my only question was about the capital projects. We have such generic round numbers, estimates for a lot of these prices. And when you look into the comprehensive annual financial review, maybe I'm not looking in the right place, but I have a hard time finding where these line items actually panned out in terms of their price, their estimates, as opposed to their end result price that we paid for them. So my question number one is there a place where we'd be able to find the information about things like these capital improvements, where we could see the projected price or the estimated price, and then we could see the final price after, and of course this is in retrospect, but after the plan has been enacted. So in this case, we have a 5-year plan. I'd like to be able to go look back and see clearly how that went. The question number one is, can we do that? And then the second question is, if we cannot currently do that, how do we find any accountability with the numbers? I don't have any problem with the spinning. I'm just a numbers guy. I'd like to be able to see them.
All right, I think I can address the questions up here. In terms of in terms of the effort that comes out each that comes out each a year around December. We show a total amount of per fund. So we don't show the a detail of per a CIP individual a project in the effort itself. But we could do a new CIP report itself that would give a current update on each of a project. Say what we spent, and then also show what was approved. I don't think it'd be too hard to put a new CIP type report together that would show the type of detail that you requested.
Thank you, Director Fuentes. That's fantastic. Paul, Mr. Kamorian, is this within our scope as a planning commission to be concerned with? It seems like it may be, of course, a different department and the request that would need to go through council to have extra work done on the part of the Director of Finance just to get another report, just to appease one small planning commissioner. I do think for transparency purposes, of course, it would behoove us to have that information available to the public. So how would we best go about asking Mr. Fuentes to put that report together moving forward?
Oh, thank you, Commissioner Colville. So, this is very common when we review annually the CIPs that we kind of venture off into the particulars of a project. So as a resident, you're certainly allowed to see in the total cost of a project. And some of these things we haven't yet worked out all the details. So, for example, you want to see a contract between the city and the contractor that we hire to do like a street overlay. That is kind of the minutia, and it's public information, you can have it. But for the purpose of this meeting, you're really focusing on a project's correlation with some policy that's meant to achieve some outcome. And per state law, you need to recommend, your advisor, you're not a decision maker, that the CIP is consistent with the general plan policies. And then, you got to understand the policies are very broad. We were just getting into that one policy, public safety 2.1. We're not here to discuss what type of body armor that a police officer wears or the caliber of ammunition they use in their gun. It gets way too much into the weeds. The question is creating a sidewalk, does that improve mobility? And if you think there's a direct relationship with the policy, you make that call. If you feel that a police officer having a protective vehicle, no different than a bank has an armored vehicle to move money, I guess they could have in the back of their station wagon. Is that a correlation that's tied to the general plan, right? So it's very common to kind of jump into it and dive into it. So somehow you need to separate some of the more personal interest with really kind of the broad brush of a general plan. So anything that you want to understand in terms of the public's transparency, we can get it for you. But in terms of this meeting, it's really looking at it as, do sidewalks improve mobility? Is that connected to the general plan? Or streets paving, is that tied to the general plan? And just kind of keep it simply like that.
Perfect. I understand. Thank you for the explanation.
Yeah.
And I think I don't want to take any more time on that, because you're right. We're getting into the minute details. And my request was a side request. So I guess what I'll do is I'll reach out to Director Fuentes maybe directly, or through you, Paul, to see about how to obtain that information later, or at least trying to work on a report that might help for the public's purpose. And again, outside of the scope of what we're talking about now. Thank you, Paul Kamorian.
Commissioner Hines, I think we're still on the questions for staff. So you still got questions for staff?
I want to, before we lose Police Chief Berg, I want to thank him and his entire department on just their service and excellent contribution to Campbell.
I had one question for.
Is there a question? Okay, good.
I do have a question for Chief Berg while we still have him. Thank you, first off, for being here and being willing to answer questions. So I think the concern that we have about the use of a Bearcat is not so much its use for hostage rescue and in armed active shooter situations, where I just looked on Wikipedia and it's frequently used there. The concern we have is, you train to use this vehicle or vehicles of this type for that sort of purpose. The concerns, I think, that at least that I have, are that it would be used to, for example, deploy CS gas to disperse crowds. Is that something is that like a proposed or expected use of that kind of equipment? Is that something you train for?
So, I mean, the short answer is yes. And for a piece of equipment like this, I mean, so we have very detailed policies and procedures for most everything that we do. And a piece of equipment like this is no different. There will be policies and procedures in place on how it's used, when it's used, who authorizes the use of it. And crowd control is one of those potential uses for it. I am fully wanting to be a part of the conversation, fully want to be transparent with our department, with what we do, because I'm very proud of the work that the men and women of our department do on a daily basis. And we're in a very interesting time right now, because there are issues coming to the forefront that most people haven't thought about unless they're in the field of law enforcement. I would be surprised if previous planning commission has ever talked about the deployment of CS gas. And I'm sure there's people who aren't familiar with it, but our current situation brings up those questions. I guess my response to that is, and this is with all due respect, the operational aspects of the police department are based on legal advice, training, years of experience, input from other police departments who have had pieces of equipment like this. And whether somebody's for or against using rubber bullets, or for or against using tear gas in a riot, I think those are ancillary discussions, and they're valid discussions, and I'm more than willing to be a part of those. But when it comes to a purchase of a piece of equipment like we're talking about specifically for this, I think I'll repeat myself, but at the end of the day, I am looking to equip our police department to appropriately serve our community and provide the level of protection that you deserve. And it is my belief, my strong belief, that this type of equipment will accomplish that. And you look at situations like the Gilroy Garlic Festival. While we hope that it never happens here, there are situations that occur right in our backyard where this type of equipment may be used one day for that type of event, it may be used another day for a Denny's or our SWAT team serving a search warrant. So I guess the short answer to your question is there will be a variety of uses for a vehicle like this, but will be policies and procedures in place to make sure that they're used effectively. And that goes for all of our equipment. And we just posted a response on our website today, if you're not familiar with the 8 Can't Wait campaign. And I think these discussions are valid right now. And it's important for you to know what our department is doing to serve you. But there's also a lot of background information and there's context to everything. And I think those are the important conversations to have on these recent current events. Sorry, I got off on a little bit of a tangent, but.
Thank you for answering that and explaining it. I very much appreciate your candor.
Well, let's just ask now, if anybody has any more questions for staff, then we can open the public hearing, and that might be real quick, and we'll go right back to it. Any more questions for staff? All right, no more questions for staff, then I'll ring the gavel here and open the public hearing. Does anybody from the public wish to address Planning Commission on this matter? Seeing or hearing nobody wanting to do that, I'll close the public hearing and we'll go right back to our discussion. And I don't know who wants to take this. I guess, well, let me just jump in right here just really quickly. And I thought that these questions were really good. And obviously the Bearcat question is an issue in the community right now because of what's happened in the last 2 or 3 weeks, and real valid question. I thought Commissioner Ching did a great job. Commissioner Cole, Commissioner Bookbinder, everybody was doing a good job trying to stay on what the Planning Commission's purview is. Does the CIP follow the general plan? I think Commissioner Ching especially was trying to zero in on that, and I thought those were really a good discussion. That just made me personally thinking about that. I think that the issue of the priorities now changing for police forces everywhere is an issue, is a political issue. I think in terms of what the Planning Commission is doing, does it follow the general plan? I think I really don't have a problem with that. I think it does follow the general plan. So I think that the item before us is actually a pretty good, and one that I would pretty much approve. But let's open it up for discussion. I don't know who wants to go next. Who wants to talk on these issues? Anybody? Are we all talked out?
I'm ready to
Commissioner
make a
Colville.
motion to adopt the resolution unless anybody
Hang on,
else would like to
Commissioner
talk.
Colville. I think Commissioner Ching wanted to speak here real quick.
Great.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So, it's not just this Bearcat, it's the whole range of CIPRs. I don't have, I think they're all consistent. I do have a problem with the Bearcat, and I'm not saying it's needed, not needed or needed. I am not qualified to say whether we should have that as a community, right? That's for Captain Berg, and there's other people outside of the police force who I'm sure would want to comment on that, right? There's a whole bunch of interest groups. So you have the view of the police and you have the view of other organizations. And I'm purely looking at this from the purview of 2.1 and 4.1. And in my mind, we don't know what the citizens' needs are. I think that I'd be surprised if they haven't changed over the last few weeks. It may be we need it even more, or it may be that we don't need it at all, right? The two extremes. And the improved feeling of safety, very subjective, right? What I'm saying is rather, in my mind, rather than stamping this and saying, yeah, go ahead, I think in the current circumstance, we should pause and think about this. And take this back to the City Council and public forum for discussion. So I'm okay with everyone, but I'm not in agreement on the Bearcat for those reasons.
Anybody else want to address the issue? I guess we do a motion that would break out the one item separately?
I want to actually support the Commissioner Colville and Chief Berg. To me, we have a police chief that has I don't exactly know Police Chief Berg's resume, but He's got a lifelong career and commitment of, in this. And there's a tremendous amount of legal review, police review that they go through with this to address situations. And I think if, as our role for agreement to the general plan and the safety of Campbell, I fully support and feel that the request from Police Chief Berg, or however the requests were made, that they be incorporated and accepted by the Planning Commission to move forward. I'm not in favor of separating out or line item veto the plan.
We could try a motion and let's see what happens. Anybody want to make a motion?
I'd like to
Commissioner
adopt,
Campbell.
make a motion to adopt the resolution. We're finding the proposed capital improvement plan from the city of Campbell 2021 to 2025 as consistent with the Campbell general plan. Do we have a second?
Do we have a second? Commissioner Hines seconds. Corinne, can we have a roll call vote?
In alphabetical order, Commissioners Bookbinder,
Aye.
Commissioner Ching,
For the reasons stated, no on the Bearcat. So there'll be no, that would be since it's not broken out, that would be no to everything.
Commissioner Colville,
Aye.
Commissioner Hines,
Aye.
and Commissioner Rivlin,
Aye.
and Chair Cray.
Aye. So that motion passes. So the matter will be coming up at the city council meeting tentatively scheduled for June 25th.
So,
Well, that closes that item.
Chair Craig, just for conclusion of that item and to Commissioner Ching, your comments and opinions will be reflected in the minutes. So your opinions will be conveyed to the council.
Thank you.
Very, very valid opinions.
Yeah.
So that item is closed. So we'll move to our second and last item on our Zoom meeting here, our first Zoom meeting. Second item is PLN 2019-215, public hearing to consider the application of Auntie Papaya's, I messed up that name, I'm sure, for a site and architectural review permit, PLN 2019-215, to allow the construction of an approximately 3,800 square foot, one-story single-family residence and an increase to the allowable fence height on property located at 596 Emory Avenue. Staff is recommending that this item be deemed categorically exempt under CEQA. Planning Commission action is final unless appealed in writing to the City Council within 10 calendar days, and our project planner again is Daniel Fama.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. Just give me one moment here. Okay, screen. Okay.
It was a while ago, Chair, but didn't we review this in SARC?
It was a SARC review, so we'll ask
Yeah,
for the
okay.
SARC report after the
Okay.
staff report. Yeah,
I wanted to make sure I was still thinking of the same one.
that is a SARC item, definitely.
Okay, has everyone seen that?
Got it.
Got it.
All right, great. So this is a site and architectural review permit for a property located at 596 Emory Avenue for construction of a new single-family home. This is an approximately 13,300 square foot single-family parcel on Emory, south of Bud, located in the R110 single-family zoning district, subject to the Santa Monica Area Neighborhood Plan. The site is developed with this single-family residence that would be substantially demolished as part of the application. Here we have the site plan that shows the 3,800 square foot single-family rebuild house. It also shows the conversion of an existing garage, or it's the rear of the property that would be converted to an ADU. Other improvements include a new swimming pool, rear deck, patio. The plans indicate 8-foot high fencing at the rear property lines, as well as about halfway up the side property lines, tapering down to standard height as you approach the street. The driveway has been slightly modified since SARC reviewed it, different configuration to also show permeable pavers. The project would comply with all applicable setback and development standards with a 0.33 FAR and a 35% lot coverage. The design shown here is mid-century modern, incorporating offset angular roof lines, asymmetric windows, mixed wall cladding with stucco and vertical cedar. Staff believes that this design may be found consistent with the design guidelines of the Santa Monica Area Neighborhood Plan. While mid-century modern is not commonly found within the Santa Monica area, the design style does tend to incorporate features that are common throughout the whole community and within the Santa Monica area, such as hipped and sloped roof lines, as well as stucco wall cladding. The Santa Monica plan does provide a lot of flexibility to the Planning Commission in reviewing architectural design. It does not incorporate prescriptive design styles like some plans do in other cities, where only certain types of designs are allowed and other types are prohibited. The plan even goes out of its way to say that it's not doing that in order to provide that degree of flexibility to the Planning Commission. Therefore, in conclusion, staff does recommend that the Planning Commission adopt the resolution approving the site architectural review permit. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Are there any questions for Daniel or staff?
I noticed that there's one of the modifications is to the fence height. Can you talk a bit about why what is the purpose of the fence height limits and why is this more flexible? I noticed that when Stack sent their addendum, they said they like the higher fences and they wish that all the fences could be that high by right. Can you tell us a bit more about those regulations and the reasoning behind them?
Sure. The standard fence height in the city is 6 feet, and that applies to the side and rear property lines. Typically, however, fencing needs to reduce in height as you approach the street. Full height fencing also is limited to at least beyond the first 15 feet of the property to minimize the walling off of a property. That being said, there are a lot more frequent requests to increase fence heights between properties. And that typically is something that staff does approve through administrative fence exceptions when both neighbors are agreeable. Taller fences between properties don't really have a community impact since they're not typically that visible from the streets. In this case, the back of the property does face the percolation pond, so there's no issue here. In this particular case, the site plan actually shows the break point where you can see my cursor. And so at that point, it drops from 8 feet to 3.5 feet. So from the street perspective, it won't appear as if the property is being hemmed in like a compound. I would point out, though, for context, that in the Campbell Village area, that the neighbors did actually want to have a greater fence height by right, and that plan does allow 7 feet now, which is more permissive than the Santa Monica area.
So to sum up, there's sort of a balance between the community effect of everybody not having very high fences, which would make everybody look like they were sealed in their own compounds. But at the same time, people want privacy. So that's what this is trying to balance between.
Correct. I mean, fencing tends to be a bit more challenging around corner lots when people really want to maximize their side yards, but then often comes at the expense of the streetscape. But that's not the case here.
Well, and I'd like to make a comment on that if I can.
Sure. Well, these are questions for staff, but we'll have the discussions shortly.
Got it.
Okay. Any questions? Any more questions for Daniel? Anybody? Well, maybe we should ask for the SARC report now. I know SARC reviewed this, goes way back, I think, but is there a SARC report on this project?
I'm pretty sure I was there. I can't remember who else was there.
Yeah, I was there with you.
Yeah,
Chair.
okay. All right.
Yeah. I think the keynotes were in the package that Daniel sent out. I would, so I think that really type of captures it. I think our feeling was it was a very good design, modern, but also type of the single story type of fitting into the San Thomas neighborhood. I don't remember anything really being an issue, and in fact, it looked actually an excellent design.
Yeah, I think that was, I share that, and that was kind of why it was felt like a really good fit. There wasn't really anything, they weren't trying to pressure anything, push any decision on there. I think we had also suggested they talk to the community team and STAC, and it sounds like they had a good conversation with them, and the letter from them was certainly favorable. So that was they certainly want to engage and be part of the community. So
All right, very good. Yeah, very good report. And then we'll open up the public hearing. And I know that the applicant and the architect are here. I'm not sure who wants to speak, but if the applicant would care to waited very patiently, and the applicant would care to address us, or the architect, now's the time.
Yes, hi. My name is Antje Pais. I'm the architect on the project. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. Okay,
Yes.
well, yeah, this is my first project in Campbell, so I'm really excited that we finally made it this far. We've been working together with the owners for about a year on this project, had a lot of design iteration before we, kind of settled on this one. As I said in the SARC meeting, for those who were present, I think a lot of our decisions were guided by site and community features. We knew we wanted a single-story structure because of the scale of adjacent homes. We chose the roof shapes and angles for solar orientation. We have a large solar array on this south-facing roof. And we really generally just wanted a building that was clean line, but also informal, inviting, non-pretentious, and energy efficient. Those were kind of the words that the owners had in their mind when they first spoke to me and reached out to me. And I'm kind of hoping that with this design we've achieved most of those goals.
Thank you very much. Would the applicant care to speak?
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Pranati, and I'm Sean. Nice to meet everybody. I don't really have a lot to add over what Antje has already said. We've got, we met Commissioner Hines and Commissioner Ching at the last meeting, which was about 3 months back. We were hoping to actually bring this project in March. We are a little bit
Sorry about that.
schedule. Yes. And we're still hoping to try to get the permits in, after this approval. We're excited about joining the Campbell community, and we're looking forward to being a part of it.
Well, thank you very much. Is there anybody else out there that wants to address the commission on this item? I don't think they're okay. Nobody is. So at this point, then we'll just close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission, and whoever wants to start it off, who's game?
I'd like to just touch on the concern that Bookbinder had, if I can.
Sure.
The question was regarding the fence height and just being a neighbor in that same area. The property they're speaking of on Emory, it does back up to that reservoir, which is also right there with San Tomas, and very noisy. I'm actually sitting in my backyard now in that same neighborhood. You could always hear the cars, and I'm a little bit deeper in from San Tomas than Emory is. I'm up from Sobrato, so I'm close enough to still hear a lot of the sounds. I think an 8-foot high fence back there will be beneficial to the owner for privacy reasons. The main street's right there, and also for sound. And so I wanted to give some context to Commissioner Brookbinder on that fence height, because I do find it very relevant with San Tomas right there.
Thank you. That is definitely relevant.
Anybody else? I guess I'll put in my quick 2 cents is that, and I agree with Sark that it really is it's a really a nice design, and I really like the design. Saying that, I did have to look twice, 3 times because of where it's located in the stamp, which is trying to maintain the rural, area, and everybody's trying to kind of get along there really nicely. And I really, a lot of my concerns were taken out when the Santa Tomas Area Neighborhood Association's comments I thought were very good. So yeah, I do think it fits in. I did think of Eichler when I saw this a little bit. I know that the Santa Tomas Area Neighborhood Association said the same thing. I think it's nice. I think it definitely is unique. It'll be a unique product, but there's no reason why Santa Tomas area can't have a nice, modern, unique design that still fits in with the neighborhood. So I thought that was a pretty nice project. Anybody else? Commissioner Ridlin.
I'm supportive of the project. I think that looks very nice and would fit the community.
Commissioner Bookbinder?
I'd be in support of the project. I like the way it looks. It's a beautiful house, and I'd like to thank the architect for doing business here.
I'd like to.
I was just going to suggest
fine.
making a motion.
Yep, I'm just ready to make a motion.
Good, that's good. Anybody?
Great. I'll like to make a motion adopting resolution approving site and architectural review permit PLN 2019-215 to allow the construction of approximately 3,800 square foot, 1-story single family residence, and an increase to the allowable fence height. Do I have a second?
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by a few people. I guess Commissioner Ching, I think, was one.
Okay,
Corinne, can we have a roll call vote?
Commissioner Bookbinder,
Aye.
Commissioner Ching,
Aye.
Commissioner Colville,
Aye.
Commissioner Hine,
Aye.
Commissioner Rivlin,
Aye.
Mayor Cray.
Aye. So that item passes. Congratulations. And this item is final. The Planning Commission action is final unless appealed in writing to the city clerk within 10 calendar days.
Welcome to the neighborhood.
Yeah, welcome to Campbell.
Yeah, thank you for coming to Campbell, and thank the architect. Thank you for helping us in Campbell.
Thanks, Hunter. Thank you. Are we allowed to?
You can
Yeah, you're all done.
exit.
You're all done. You're all done. You can hang around. We have all kinds of interesting things to talk about because Commissioner Kamoyan is going to give his report.
The girls will sleep instead. All right.
Yeah, you've had a lot already. Commissioner Kamoyan, do you have anything to report?
Thank you, Chair Cray, members of the Planning Commission. So the City Council has been working pretty hard to help the business community. Last Tuesday, today, we had a meeting, and it was a conversation on how to work with the business community for recovery. And they focused on dining, restaurants with dining, because the new county order allows the public now to eat in restaurants, but only outdoors. So in order to help make up for lost space indoors, the council gave staff direction to allow flexibility of its standards. And what that means is that we are working with the business community to allow them to expand their outdoor dining areas without any permits. There's still oversight, and there's a relaxation of the codes. So for example, in the downtown, dining's supposed to not go beyond the tent space of the occupied business. And they're allowing businesses now to expand beyond their storefronts. And this is all an effort for the recovery. And at today's meeting, they had a meeting today on the budget, they memorialized that direction in resolutions. However, we've already been working with the businesses as of last Friday. So if you notice, a lot of vibrancy in the downtown. That's a direct result of the council's forward thinking. And we really appreciate that because the businesses are now thriving, and this is an effort for our recovery. So that's the discussion about outdoor dining on public property. We're still going to meet with the DCBA to discuss logistics on allowing dining to be in public parking lots as well as public parks. And we have a meeting on Thursday. Staff has a meeting with the DCBA, the Chamber of Commerce, to discuss that. So stay tuned. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact me tomorrow. Anything else on the director's report?
Thank you, Director, for helping the businesses. They're suffering.
Yes.
So just excellent forward thinking on that.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you for the feedback. That definitely helps us, and the staff's doing a tremendous job. We're Zooming now. This is part of our technology of the new norm. We are fully functional in terms of the community development department's permit processing. Daniel, when did we open up our permit?
May.
Beginning of May.
Beginning of May. Yeah.
Yeah. So beginning of May, and I reported to the council today, from the beginning of May to today, to June 5th, last Friday, we've been just super swamped. So you don't need to come into a physical building anymore. You can submit anything online. It could be a huge subdivision. It could be a water heater. It doesn't really matter. And we've taken in almost $500,000 in permit fees. So we're moving along. This is a good sign of recovery. So working hard. The Zoom meetings, we're going to continue with SARC and Planning Commission, all Zoom. So technology is our friend. And this meeting has been pretty good. And we're going to continue to refine it. One of these days we'll be back in the council chambers, but for now it's social distancing and Zoom. And I believe that concludes my report. Any questions, commissioners?
I'll just echo fellow commissioners' comments. Great job from the planning department and the councillors helping these businesses get back. It's tough.
Yeah, I have to give a lot of thanks to Daniel and Stephen. They're very tech savvy, so they really helped propel our My Government Online, our software system, to really open it up. When we had initially been in the shutdown, we took that time to get this system up and running. So we're
right.
Good job.
Yeah, excellent job. We seem to have a dearth of attendees, which would have been very unusual in the office environment. So usually that in this sort of Zoom environment, maybe there's just a one pager that could be sent out as far as how to Zoom. Maybe Cecil can help as far as getting that out to attendees. I don't know if you're seeing the same thing in the council meeting, but I think that there certainly would be a lot of technology inhibiting step for the majority of people to participate in something.
Commissioner Hines, I believe you have to pre-register. I don't believe you could attend randomly. I think you had to pre-register to attend.
So there is a link.
Phone
There is
number
a
that you
link,
can call
so-
into.
It's pretty easy, I think, to do it if you want to, but you got to know how to do it, I guess, or where to look for it.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, just encourage a little more assistance to them to do it.
we can certainly, I'll work with Cecil and the gang and try to get those. You're talking about instructions, right?
Yeah, just a one pager. Hey,
Yep.
This is how you get to Zoom to participate in all the meetings.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Just going to be a couple of clicks.
Yeah, good idea.
And then you get what I think. I don't know which one had the kid walk in, but that's what you get when you're on Zoom and doing this sort of thing. You get the extra person, the extra sounds, which I think every
good.
video conference I've been on has been having that. It's pretty fun to see and hear.
Okay, well, it's great to see everybody, and I guess so we'll close this meeting.
I have some new business.
Commissioner Bookbinder. Oh, I'm sorry, new business. Commissioner Bookbinder.
So just to introduce, before this all started, Commissioner Colville and I attended Planning Commissioners Academy and did a lot of learning and reading. And it turns out, I was not aware of this, but the Planning Commission can initiate amendments to the zoning code. So as I understand it, and please, Paul, correct me if I have this wrong, we would propose something here. If we get a majority, we agendize it and discuss an actual amendment to send to the city council at the next meeting. Do I have that right?
Yeah, and I believe you've asked this question before, and it's actually spelled out in the municipal code. You can initiate a zone text amendment. However, if it involves money and staff time, I definitely need to forward that up to the council so they can consider it within their priorities. And if they feel it doesn't fall within their priorities, they can, in essence, veto your initiative.
Absolutely understood. Both of the items I'd like to discuss. One of them, it does require research, but we had an intern do it last year, and the other one I don't believe would require research. So the first one is, we asked one of Paul's interns to research parking modifications in lowered parking requirements in areas near lowered commercial parking requirements in areas near train stations or transit heavy environments. I would like to propose that we discuss, in the same way that we have reduced residential parking requirements, we discuss having lowered commercial parking requirements near our transit stations. I don't know if I need to be more specific than that.
So you're asking to initiate a zone text amendment to modify the parking standards near transit.
The commercial parking standards, yes.
Residential and commercial.
I believe the residential ones already are modified.
Well, I mean, you can initiate a zone text amendment for.
Sure. Let's say residential and commercial.
Okay.
Well,
so
I guess
Bill, there would need to be a second to initiate that, or would it have to be at another meeting?
Yes, the first, I'm unmuted. Okay, good. The first step is you have to get it on an agenda. You can't take action on it tonight.
Of course.
It still has to be on an agenda, so you'd have to move to put it on a future agenda.
I would like to do that. That's what I am. Pardon me.
If he's making a motion to put that on the agenda, then I would second the motion to agendize that item for discussion in a future meeting.
Wait, no, I'm sorry.
It was Commissioner Colville who seconded. I guess my 2 cents is that, I'm not sure if the city council, what the city council priorities are. We have talked about, and I was going to ask Director Cremona, I forgot, believe it or not, after reading our minutes from February 11th, when we had a really good discussion about the desirability that I think we were all in sync on of having a joint meeting with the city council. I wonder if that's a first step and we kind of get their input into, do they want us taking this initiative? Do they already have their priorities? Would this mess up the city if the planning commission is setting new priorities? Or is that what they're looking for from us? Do they want us? Because if we see something that's probably a good thing to look at, should we be taking the initiative and bringing it up to them? So
my understanding is that the municipal code specifically allows us to do that. So I think it's certainly within our purview, but if we.
You froze.
He froze.
I do
Commissioner
believe that it
Bookbinder
was
froze.
seconded. Should we vote to agendize the item?
Well, okay, if there's any
Motion and a
discussion, any
second.
more discussion on the item
I don't know that we can discuss the item other than,
after it's seconded?
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's have a vote, I guess a roll call vote on this, huh?
Well,
Corinne?
are we discussing it or not?
We're,
I didn't think we
we're,
could.
You can't really
we're
discuss it
determining whether
right
or not
now.
to discuss it.
Right.
Yes, you need to determine if you want this on another agenda. So we have a motion and a second. So is there a unanimous vote to include it on another agenda?
I vote in favor.
Could we have a roll call?
Should we do a roll call vote? Yeah, let's just,
Okay, we can. Bookbinder,
Aye.
Jing,
no, you're muted.
Well done, Andrew. Aye.
okay. Commissioner Colville,
Aye, in favor.
Commissioner Hines,
No.
Commissioner Rivlin,
Aye.
and Chair Craig.
and I'm saying no for now, so no. But the item does pass, so I guess it will be on our next agenda on the 23rd, or does it have to wait till
No, it will be on a future agenda.
July, probably?
I can't give you a date. I have to work that into
Okay.
workload is.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bookbinder had another item, I believe.
Yes, there was another item I want to agendize for future discussion in the same way. At our last meeting in February, we spoke about how there was a 5-year deferment for building code enforcement for existing ADUs, but there wasn't a deferment for zoning code enforcement. And Daniel said that that's absolutely something that we could discuss at a later time. So I'd like to agendize discussion of a 5-year deferment for zoning code enforcement for existing ADUs.
Do we have a second?
Can we clarify, please, what it is, Commissioner Brookbinder? What is it you're agendizing for discussion? One more time, please. Currently,
Daniel, if you're on, please correct me if I'm wrong. There is currently a 5-year deferment for building code enforcement for existing ADUs. I am proposing a 5-year deferment for zoning code enforcement for existing ADUs to accompany that.
I see. And so what you're trying to do is, of course, just discuss it by agendizing it, correct, Commissioner?
Yes.
I second that.
I'm unaware of any zoning ordinance enforcement of ADUs. Is this a problem?
Well, Paul, I believe that Commissioner Bookbinder is referring to that ADU variance on Reading, the situation that arose from that, the distinction in state law that building code enforcement is deferred for 5 years upon owner request, but that setbacks, for instance, are zoning code violations, and that violation is not deferrable.
It was my impression that that was part of the zoning code and therefore in our purview. If I am incorrect about that, please let me know.
Yeah, I mean, we can provide an explanation. I mean, that one's a little unique. I mean, they built a structure without violated the zoning. So they just so happen to use it now for an ADU. So we can provide a response to that.
Okay, so is that is something that I can actually propose to discuss at a future meeting?
Yeah, it's unusual though to create a zoning ordinance provision for a single property. This isn't a prevalent thing. So, but if you feel that's,
Just to explain, I'm under the impression that there are an unknown number, because enforcement is ad hoc, there's an unknown number of existing unpermitted or possibly non-compliant ADUs in the city, and that this is not a one-off situation.
Yeah, because I oversee code enforcement. I'm not aware of a plethora of this situation. So, but we can certainly agendize it and provide a more detailed response to see if you're willing as a commission to pursue such a change. Because if it only involves one property, if that's even applicable, does it make sense to, you know what I mean? Create a zone.
Right. Like we don't know how many, I'm under the impression that we don't know how many unpermitted ADUs there are in the city, and therefore, like, we can't say that this only applies to one. We don't know how many it applies to. But we should talk about this at a later point. I would like to. So I'd like to move to agendize that for future discussion.
The motion's made. Did we second it?
I seconded it.
Commissioner Colville seconded. So I guess a roll call vote, Corinne?
Commissioner Bookbinder,
Aye.
Commissioner Ching,
No.
Commissioner Colville,
Aye.
Commissioner Hines,
No.
Commissioner Rivlin,
Aye.
and Chair Cray.
I'll say no for the same reason as the last one. So that leaves us with a 3-3 vote. I forget what happens.
Doesn't pass.
Does
Does not pass.
Yeah.
Yeah, that motion fails.
I'd like to chime in and just support Commissioner Brookbinder for a sparking discussion. I know we've had a long day. We've been a while since we've seen each other. Long meeting, Zoom. But look, I truly commend Commissioner Brookbinder for sparking discussion that's not on our agenda currently. This I find absolutely imperative to the success of ourselves as a commission and as a city. If we were to just continue to look at what we have put in front of us on the desk items without trying to discuss things further that we felt important, we'd be silencing and handcuffing ourselves. And so that's why I feel strongly about seconding his motion, even if it doesn't pass. At least that way we can discuss what it is Commissioner Brookbinder feels is important, as opposed to censoring that. So I do appreciate that, Commissioner Brookbinder, and I hope we see some more of that foresight into what we're doing here as a commission. Thank you, sir.
I totally agree with Commissioner Bookbinder and Commissioner Colville on bringing up this new business. While I voted against both of these, I feel that it is a vote against that because I feel that there's higher priority issues, specifically about what I started the conversation around, about how to address the response of COVID-19. I don't want to propose an agenda item at this time because I think that people are working on that within the council, but I think that we really want to make sure that we're focused on the immediate issue, and I think it's a vitally important issue for us to come up with a way to address these issues. So please, Commissioner Bookbinder and Commissioner Colville, please take my no vote merely that I just feel that there's a higher priority item in there. But I look forward to the conversations on the first one that you had agendized.
Thank you very much. And that's all I have.
Mr. Kermoyan, that really following up on Mr. Bookbinder's comments on the ADUs. So I think it's the same item wasn't that the item that we had the split vote, and we were going to take it up again.
Right.
We were trying to get more people to show up, and we never did it. And next thing you know, there's a pandemic.
Yeah.
It's 3 months or 4 months later. So whatever happened with that item?
It'll be coming back to you next meeting. Meeting.
Make sure there's an odd number of commissioners.
Well, so in a way, we've kind of got it agendized anyway, Commissioner Bookbinder. It's coming back next meeting. Anyway. No, those are all good comments, everybody. I appreciate all your time and enthusiasm. You could tell that we're chomping at the bit after months of waiting.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I think at that point now we'll close this meeting of the Planning Commission via Zoom, and we will to our next meeting, which will be via Zoom on Tuesday, June 23rd. And see everybody then.
All right, thank you,
Electronically.
Good to
Commissioners.
see you all. Stay healthy, stay safe.
Stay healthy. Bye-bye, everybody.
Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.